Welcome to the Capo for Christ channel. Today, we are going to go over who were the people of the Millennial Reign of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, what they look like, and how they differ from us today. We are also going to go over the people of the Antideluvian or Pre-Diluvian world, in other words, the time before the flood of Noah, and what they look like, and explain their long lifespans and how it was possible. We're going to wrap it up with what dragons really are, as they are quoted several times in God's Word. People in the millennial reign of Jesus Christ had glorified bodies. That would be the apostles and saints that were chosen to run the vassal kingdoms under the King of Kings, Jesus Christ. Just like it says in 1 Corinthians 15, 53 through 55. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? If you read between the lines here, you will catch the revelation that there is no more sting in death, and that a select few, considering how many people have come and gone since that time, we are the rest of the dead who are alive today, as Revelation 20:5 states. We also need to note that the people of the millennial reign were the first resurrection, of which the second death will have no power, as Revelation 20:6 states. The people that were ruled by Jesus and the saints were the nations ruled by a rod of iron, as Revelation 2:27 tells us. In Revelation 2:25 through 26, Jesus tells us, But that which ye have already hold fast till I come, and he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. Remember the man who made it to the wedding feast of the Lamb but was missing his wedding garment? And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had not on a wedding garment. And he saith unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then said the king to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. These were the people who wanted no part of the kingdom of God, which is exactly what Jesus brought to this earth. I suspect nations like Hindustan or modern-day India were of such nations that refused the kingship of Jesus Christ during the millennial reign. They continued to talk to Satan through the so-called vents in the prison walls. And this is why he had to be loosed after the 1,000 years to go and deceive the nations again, as we see in Revelation 20, verses 7 through 9. The prophet Daniel also spoke of a time when Satan would change times and laws, as we see in Daniel 7:25. This is exactly what we're dealing with today when bringing this information to the public. Even though all the evidence is there all over the world screaming that the King of Kings was here and reigned for 1,000 years, so many still want to deny it. It needs to be noted that sometime between Satan being loosed from his prison and Jesus and the saints leaving the magnificent civilization that he created, the people who were just there were systematically massacred and literally put under our feet in catacombs and underground tunnel systems that connect the world through these systems. The spiritual ramifications of putting the everyday people from the millennial reign that did not have glorified bodies underground into these catacombs is heavy, heavy witchcraft that has held until recently on how the parasitic elites have been able to keep the masses blind until now. Aside from the saints in glorified bodies and the vassal kingdoms they were given in their fiefdoms to rule with Christ, there are some strange looking people that we are compelled to investigate now at this point. The first of these people are called blemies. Blemmies are a race of people that don't have heads. Instead, their faces are on their chests. There are depictions of blemmies on all types of old maps and literature. The absence of a head on top of the neck and replacement of it being put on the chest is sort of like a Mr. Potato Head type of person that God created. I believe these blemmy people actually existed and may still today. This pic of a blemmy was made by Gulame Letestu, sometimes referred to as Gulame Letetu. 1509, allegedly, was a French privateer or pirate and navigator. He was one of the foremost cartographers and map makers of his time and an author of the depicts maps. His maps were distinguished by their sophistication and detail. They influenced generations of cartographers, navigators, and explorers. Letestu was a successful privateer during the early years of the French Wars of Religion. In 1573, he and Sir Francis Drake attacked a Spanish mule train escorting gold and silver to Nombre de Dios on the Atlantic coast of Panama, and he was subsequently killed following his capture by the Spanish. So right around the time of the end of the Millennial Reign and the beginning of the little season that we are seeing, the inheritors, or the so-called explorers, taking and making note of this strange race of people called blemmies, as far back as I have been able to locate with any degree of certainty, it looks like blemmies were inhabitants of ancient Libya, all the way down to the Nile, and even in Hindustan, or India as it is known today. There are variations of blemmies, with some having their eyes on their shoulders. The name blemmy goes back to the Hebrew word blai, or in Moak, which means without and brain. Moving on with our strange people of antiquity, next we have Cyapods, or giant foot people. These people don't have 2 legs and 2 feet. Instead, they have 1 leg with a big foot at the end of it to support themselves. They would have to hop around for mobility. Mention of these monopods or cyapods goes back to 414 BC and are even mentioned by Pliny the Elder. Supposedly they were extremely agile and could use their giant foot to shade themselves from the sun on a hot day. Again, they are mentioned to have lived in India or ancient Hindustan. Remember when I mentioned I didn't think India was one of the territories that bent the knee to Jesus during the Millennial Reign? No pun intended. Middle Age or Dark Age reference of these incredible race of people is mentioned in a legend continued into the Middle Ages. For example, with Isidore de Seville in his Etymology, where he writes the race of Cyapods are said to live in Ethiopia. They have only 1 leg and are wonderfully speedy. The Greeks called them shade-footed ones because when it is hot, they lie on their backs on the ground and are shaded by the great size of their foot. The Hereford map of Mundi, drawn in 1300 or 300, shows a cyapod on one side of the world, as does a world map drawn by Beatus of Liebang around 730 to 800 BC. I apologize, AD. Moving on, we have the dog-headed people, better known as cyanocephali. This is not a joke, nor are these cyanocephali to be confused with what we know today in the cryptid world as dogmen. They are different beings altogether. Dogmen have been used as a weapon for the Black Ops projects in genetic modification to hunt, kill, and make people disappear that venture too far into national parks, which is a topic worthy of its own video as to what's going on with the mysterious disappearances of people in national parks and forests. So now that we got that differentiation cleared up, cyanocephalies are humans that literally have the heads of a dog or a jackal. They go all the way back in the lore of civilizations such as Egypt, Greece, China, and again, India. It should be noted that all the above-mentioned civilizations were major problems to the children of God in times past, or in the current era. Egypt originally held God's children as slaves for 400 years. Greece was one of the civilizations that also held God's children captive. A prophecy of this can be seen in Daniel 10 and 20. Look at the Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita to learn about the paganism and Nephilim wars of the past when it comes to India. And finally, China is Magog, as referenced in Ezekiel chapter 38. It's worthy of mention that the son of the demon god Horus was a cyanocephaly named Duamutef. Also, the Egyptian god Anubis is also a cyanocephaly. These dog-headed people were noted in antiquity, and many Spanish explorers even had reports of them into what would be known as the 1500s, or around the time of the Millennial Reign was wrapping up. These dog-headed people did not speak the way we do today, but they did have their own language by all accounts. They would communicate through different types of barking and howling, as one would imagine a dog to do. They were also known to wear the skins of other animals and beasts. This shows a level of organization and civilization as well that we can't ignore when it comes to the cyanocephaly. The fourth and final type of strange people of antiquity belongs to a group called troglodytes. These people are almost Sasquatch-like in nature. But just as the cyanocephalies are not what we know today as dogmen in the cryptid community, troglodytes are not Bigfoots, even though they are people that are covered from face to foot with hair. The most famous and intriguing case of a troglodyte that I've found is actually Mary Magdalene, or more commonly known as Hairy Mary. Supposedly, by some accounts, Mary Magdalene was a woman covered with hair from head to toe. The Catholic Church has shown this in a lot of their old artwork. I would advise anyone to please consider the source when they try to make important biblical figures to be or look like some type of freak. In other hands, or other words, due to the sheer amount of art and information about Mary of Magdalena, being one of these troglodytes makes me question the possibility of this being sheer ancient propaganda, or is it the truth to this? When researching this topic of troglodytes, the information can be very scant. Troglodytes are said to be wild people that lived in caves. Greek historian Herodotus, who is the man credited with being the father of history, lived in the 400s BC, under the rule of the Medes or Persian Empire. It should be noted this is before the world at that time was Hellenized, because Alexander the Great had not come to the scene for another 75 years or so to overthrow the rule of King Cyrus and form the Hellenized New World Order of the time. Back to the troglodytes, or hairy cave-dwelling people, for a moment. It's said that they ate lizards and reptiles, as well as killing their elderly, which they had absolutely no recognition for. Moving on, now that we have a grasp of the people of the Millennial Reign having glorified bodies, much like how an angel would appear when they choose to manifest in human form, and also the same way Jesus showed up after he resurrected and walked through walls when he convinced Thomas that it was truly him. We looked at some human oddities that certainly did exist in the past and might even still do today. We are going to shift gears now to the Antideluvian people, or the people that existed during and before the flood of Noah. In Genesis 6:3, God declares the lifespan of man to be cut drastically, from living 900 some years down to 120 years. The Antideluvian world is something we can't really even fathom today. First off, it never rained. The ground was watered from the fountains of the deep, as referenced in Genesis 7 and 11, and also in Proverbs 8 and 28, which are what we see today as geysers, like Yellowstone, and what pseudoscience will mention as craters on the earth. The craters are the ones that erupted during the flood, and the geysers are simply active water spouts from the inner earth or hollow earth. The atmosphere was oxygen rich before the flood, which caused everything to grow to enormous and gigantic proportions. In the book of Enoch, chapter 7, verse 2, it talks of beings that were 2,000 to 3,000 ells. This means the common Nephilim would be around 2 to 3 miles in height. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if we look at some mountains today, we can see the bodies and heads of these giants gasping for air as the firmament closed in on them and made it impossible for them to breathe air. This would mean that people were much larger in those days as well. I'm not stating this as fact, but there are accounts of Noah bringing Adam's skeletal remains on the bottom story of the ark, which was 3 stories tall, according to the records in Genesis. So after the flood, not only did human lifespans reduce by almost 90%, but we got much smaller and smaller as well. I'm going to propose now that what the pseudoscience we were warned against in 1 Timothy chapter 6 verses 20 through 21 proposes to be aware of. So-called species that they say walk next to man, but were not man, as Neanderthal, Denosovin, Homo florensis, and the like are actually antediluvian people. When they give dates like 50,000 years ago or hundreds of millions of years, these things are so stupid and laughable to me that it's actually very sad. I'm going to list now all of the antediluvian people that pseudoscience tells us about. Let's reiterate real quick that this is what people who actually lived 500 to 900 years would look like. They would have thicker jaws, better teeth, more pronounced foreheads, and the like. So we're going to look at what so-called histories call monkey men now and see that these are actually people of the past that lived up to 900 years and what they actually look like. The first one is called Flores man. They say that Homo florensis is an extinct species of small archaic humans that inhabited the island of Flores, Indonesia, until the arrival of modern humans about 50,000 years ago. Yeah, right. The remains of an individual who would have stood about 1.1 meters in height was discovered in 2003 in Liang Bois Cave. Homo rudolfensis is an extinct species of archaic human from the early Pleistocene or whatever of East Africa about 2 million years ago. Because H. rudolfensis coexisted with several other hominins, it is debated that specimens can be confidently assigned to this species beyond the skull or lectotype and other partial skull aspects. No bodily remains are definitively assigned to H. rudolfensis. Consequently, both of its generic classifications and validity are debated without any consensus, with some recommending the species to actually belong to the genus Australopithecus. See, it's all nonsense. They can't even agree on their own lying sciences and made up 50 million years ago this, 50,000 years ago that. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're looking at the bodies of men that lived up to 900 years. That's why they looked so different. Next, we have Neanderthals, who they do say are human. Homo neanderthalensis or Homo sapiens are an extinct group of archaic humans, generally regarded as distinct species, though some regard it as a subspecies of Homo sapiens, who lived in Eurasia until about 40,000 years ago. That's interesting, seeing that the world has only been around for close to 6,000 years, but anyway, this type of specimen, Neanderthal 1, was found in 1856 in the Neander Valley in present-day Germany. It is not clear when the line of Neanderthals split from that of modern humans, say the studiers. They have produced various times ranging from 315,000 to more than 800,000 years ago. The date of divergence of Neanderthals from their ancestor H. Heidelbergensis is also unclear. Look, man, this is all crap. The last of these ancient people that I'm going to mention that are actually antediluvian or pre-flood people are the Denosovins. And now mainstream science says that they may have contributed to up to 6% of the genome of present-day humans, suggesting of a limited inbreeding between the previous species that we spoke about. Now look, these are the Antideluvian people, I'm telling you. So now let's move on to the next and final lie that they've told us about. And that lie would be the dinosaur lie. So-called dinosaurs or dragons, as God's word tells us, can be found in Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 and 21, Genesis 3, 1 through 19, Isaiah chapter 51, 9 through 11, Ezekiel chapter 29, 1 through 4, Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 through 14, Gospel of Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11, Romans chapter 12, Ezekiel chapter 29, verse 3. Now Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is referred to as a great dragon that lies in the middle of his rivers. In Psalms chapter 74, verse 13, the Lord said that he has broken the heads of dragons when he divided the sea by force. Isaiah chapter 34, verse 13 is a reference to dragons. Revelation chapter 12, verse 3, a great red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns is described. Revelation chapter 20, verse 2 states that Satan is referred to as a dragon and he is to be bound for 1,000 years. Revelation 1 and 21 states that God created a great sea monster, or tannin, which is a Hebrew word that means dragon, serpent, or sea monster. In Job chapter 41, the most detailed description of a biblical sea dragon, which is the Leviathan, is found here. These are dragon references that do not refer to Satan as the dragon of Revelation. It should be noted that Satan is a fallen seraphim angel, which are serpent or dragon-like in their appearance. I'll leave y'all with this and the final proof that dragons lived among humans, and in fact, Noah actually transported some of them on the ark. The ark landed in the mountains of Ararat, which is in the eastern Anatolia region of Turkey. The oldest civilization was ever found is called Göbekli Tepe. Guess where it's located? You guessed it, the eastern Anatolia region of Turkey. I'm proposing that Noah and his family settled this town known today as Göbekli Tepe. For the mainstream to date this location as one of the first civilizations is actually amazing. They tend to pretend to not know who exactly it was, though, that founded it. That's okay for a bunch of liars and devils. One important thing to note about the animals depicted in the scenery is the fact that they don't belong in the same regions of the world, meaning they shouldn't be geese with wild boars, etc. This proves the fact that Noah literally housed pairs of each animal. If you were wondering why God told Noah to bring 7 of certain types of animals, that was because they were to be used for holy sacrifices. So I'll leave you guys with this. Why is there also what we would know today or call dinosaurs with these depictions of all these other animals that definitely do not belong together? All right, Capo for Christ out, and we will see ya on the next one. Ciao.